The road stretched endlessly before him, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the vast mountains of Wyoming. Michael kept both hands steady on the wheel, though the silence in the car felt heavier than the vehicle itself. It had been years since he last drove into Jackson Hole, and each mile closer made his chest tighten. The mountains rose like stone guardians, their peaks dusted with snow, their shadows long and cold. Some people found peace in places like this. For Michael, peace was a thing he was still chasing. He wasn't sure if he'd ever catch it. The only sound inside the car came from the small breathing of Sophie, his 6-year-old daughter, sleeping in the back seat. Her head rested against the window, blonde curls pressed against the glass. She had no idea what it meant for her father to return here. To her, Jackson Hole was just a town on the map, a dot surrounded by pine trees and blue rivers. For him it was a place of ghosts. Clara, her name came uninvited, like it always did. The image of her face, gentle eyes, warm smile flashed across his mind. Clara had loved these mountains. She would laugh whenever the wind whipped through the valley, as if nature itself had told her a joke. She was gone now. Cancer had taken her too quickly, too cruelly, and in the quiet of the car, Michael still felt the ache, the hollow space she had left behind. He glanced at the rearview mirror. Sophie stirred, her lips moving like she was whispering to someone in her dreams. That little girl was the reason he hadn't broken apart completely. Responsibility had anchored him. When Clara's voice was gone, Sophie's had become the only sound he lived for. Michael inhaled deeply as the first signs of Jackson Hole appeared, wooden signs carved by hand, old ranch fences that lined the highway, and the familiar outline of the small town he once called home. It hadn't changed much. Main Street still held its cluster of shops with faded paint. The old clock tower still stood above the square. People here lived slowly, like time itself respected their pace. But for Michael, every corner carried a memory. Every building whispered a reminder of what he had lost. He parked the car outside the cabin. The wood was weathered now, the porch slightly tilted, but it was still the same home he and Clara had built together. He stepped out, boots crunching against gravel. For a moment he just stood there, staring. The cabin had once been filled with music, Clara's laughter echoing in the kitchen, Sophie's giggles bouncing off the walls. Now it was just a shell, waiting for life to return, or maybe reminding him that life here would never be the same. "Daddy," Sophie's small voice pulled him back. She rubbed her eyes, stepping out of the car with her stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. "Yes, sweetheart," Michael answered softly. "Is this where we're gonna live now?" He crouched to meet her gaze. Her eyes were Clara's eyes, wide and curious, full of innocence. "Yes, this is our home now." She looked at the cabin, tilting her head the way children do when trying to understand something bigger than themselves. Then she smiled. "I like it." Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "I'm glad you do." They walked inside together. Dust floated in the shafts of light coming through the windows. The air smelled of wood and old memories. Michael set their bags down, listening to the creak of the floorboards. Sophie skipped across the room, her laughter a fragile reminder that not everything was gone. In the kitchen, Michael ran his fingers across the counter. He could almost see Clara standing there, preparing breakfast, humming to herself. For a moment, he let himself imagine she would turn around and smile at him. But when he blinked, the space was empty. That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep in her new room, Michael stepped out onto the porch. The air was sharp and cool, carrying the scent of pine. Stars scattered across the sky, more than he remembered, shining with a quiet kind of mercy. He leaned against the railing, letting the silence press against him. He thought about the years behind him, war, loss, the endless struggle of holding on when everything inside begged him to let go. But he also thought about the years ahead. Sophie deserved more than a broken man trying to piece himself together. She deserved a father who would stay, who would fight to build something new. Michael whispered into the night, almost to himself, "I'll do better this time, for you, Clara, for Sophie." Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. The sound echoed in the valley, then faded back into silence. Michael stayed there until the chill sank into his bones, and when he finally walked inside and closed the door behind him, he knew that returning to Jackson Hole was more than just coming home. It was the first step in facing everything he had tried to bury. Tomorrow would be hard, the days after would be harder, but for the first time in a long while, Michael felt the faint spark of something he thought he had lost forever: hope. The cabin door creaked as Michael pushed it open. The hinges groaned, as if the house itself remembered him. Dust hung in the air, dancing in the afternoon light. The wooden walls, the stone fireplace, the old rug, everything was still here, and yet the silence felt louder than it ever had. He stepped inside, slowly, almost cautiously, like a man walking into a dream he wasn't ready to face. The cabin wasn't just a house. It was a memory carved into wood and stone. It was the place where his life had been full, where laughter once bounced from wall to wall. Sophie rushed past him, small feet pattering on the wooden floor. "Daddy, look, there's a rocking chair," she said with excitement, pointing to the corner. Michael's chest tightened. That chair. Clara had spent so many evenings there, holding Sophie as a baby, humming lullabies that floated into the night. He could almost hear her voice again, soft and steady, the kind of sound that made the world feel safe. He set their bags down and wandered further inside. His eyes fell on the dining table, still scarred by the scratch marks from when Clara tried to sand it herself. The porch outside called to him next, the place where mornings used to begin. He opened the back door, stepping out into the fading light, and there it was. The memory came without warning. Clara sitting on the porch steps, a mug of coffee in her hand, her hair catching the sunlight, that smiled, gentle, patient, always ready to listen. She used to wait for him there, no matter how early the day started, no matter how tired he was from work. Michael closed his eyes. For a moment, he let the memory play out fully, as if she was still here. He saw her look up at him, laugh about something simple, something small, the way only Clara could. And then he opened his eyes again, and the steps were empty. The cup was gone. The silence was back. "Daddy." Sophie's voice broke the heaviness. She stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Is Mummy here too?" Michael froze. His throat went dry. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that her mother was gone but still everywhere, that Clara's presence lingered in these walls, in the air, in every single memory he carried? He knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from Sophie's face. "Mommy's not here, sweetheart," he said gently. But this was her favorite place. She loved this house, and she loved us here. Sophie looked around, her big eyes searching as if she might still find her mother hiding somewhere in the shadows. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "I wish I could remember her more." Michael's heart twisted. Clara had passed when Sophie was so young. The little girl's memories were fragments, flashes of warmth, a lullaby, the faint smell of lavender. Michael carried all of Clara inside him, but Sophie only had pieces, and that loss, in its own way, hurt even deeper. He pulled her close. "It's okay," he whispered into her hair. "I'll tell you everything I remember, every story, so you'll never forget her." Sophie leaned against him, silent for a moment. Then, in that simple, innocent way children do, she asked the question that cut through him. "Daddy, why did Mommy have to go?" Michael closed his eyes. He had asked himself the same thing 1,000 times. There was no answer that would make sense. Not to him, not to Sophie, but he forced himself to speak. Sometimes people have to leave sooner than we want, but it doesn't mean they stop loving us. Mommy loved you more than anything in the world. She still does. The little girl nodded, her trust unshaken. "Do you think she can see us now?" Michael's voice cracked as he replied, "Yes, sweetheart. I believe she can." The two of them sat together on the porch steps as the sun slipped behind the mountains. The sky turned shades of orange and purple, painting the valley with quiet beauty. Sophie leaned her head against his shoulder, humming softly, the way her mother once did. Michael stared into the horizon, fighting the weight inside his chest. Clara's shadow was everywhere in this house, in this town, in this life he was trying to rebuild. And though it hurt, though it felt like walking through an endless storm of memories, there was also a strange comfort in it. Clara wasn't gone completely, not as long as he kept her alive in their stories, in their love, in Sophie's heart. When night finally settled, Michael carried Sophie inside and tucked her into bed. She clutched her stuffed rabbit, eyes heavy with sleep. "Good night, Daddy," she whispered. "Good night, Mummy," she added softly into the darkness. Michael stood there, silent, his heart breaking and healing all at once. Then he whispered back, almost too quietly to hear, "Good night, Clara." The morning air in Jackson Hole carried the sharp bite of pine and mountain wind. Clouds drifted lazily over the valley, and the old wooden church stood at the edge of town, its roof sagging with years of wear. Michael parked the truck by the fence and climbed out, rolling up his sleeves. The pastor, a thin man with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted him with a firm handshake. "I appreciate you coming out here, Michael. This roof has been waiting too long for a strong back and steady hands." Michael gave a small smile, happy to help. "Pasta. It'll feel good to do something with these hands again." He wasn't lying. Since coming back to Jackson Hole, he had been restless. The cabin felt like a cage at times, the memories too heavy. But here, with work to be done, he could breathe. He could focus on the weight of the axe, the resistance of the wood, the sweat on his brow, things that made sense. They walked into the tree line behind the church. The forest opened up around them, alive with sound, the chatter of birds, the groan of branches shifting in the wind, the faint rush of a stream nearby. Resin clung to the air, thick and sweet. Michael gripped the axe, set his stance, and swung. The blade sank into the trunk with a satisfying crack. The vibration ran up his arms, grounding him. Swing after swing, he coughed into the tree, each strike pulling him further from grief and closer to something solid. The work was heavy, sweat rolled down his back, his muscles burned, but the rhythm felt almost like prayer. Chop, breathe, chop, breathe. The forest gave back no words, but it listened. Villagers came and went throughout the day, some bringing water, others just stopping to watch. Jackson Hole was a small town. People remembered when Michael had left, and they noticed now that he was back. Few offered thanks, their voices filled with quiet gratitude. "It's good to see you out here, son," one woman said, her weathered face kind. "This old church has been waiting a long time for someone to care for it again." Michael nodded politely, though he didn't know what to say. Caring for something felt foreign these days. Still, he kept swinging the axe. By midday, his shoulders ached. He paused, leaning against the handle, watching as the chips of pine scattered across the ground. The forest smelled stronger now, sap leaking from the wounded trunks, glistening like amber tears. It was then that an older man shuffled up the path. His back was bent, his beard long and gray, eyes sharp under bushy brows. He carried no tools, only a cane carved from oak. "Hard work," the man said, his voice rough like gravel. Michael straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "It keeps me busy." The old man studied him for a long moment, then looked past him, into the depths of the trees. His gaze lingered there, as if he saw something Michael couldn't. "You be careful, son," he said at last. "These woods, they remember things. They hold more than wind and birds." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" The man tapped his cane against the earth. Eyes are still locked on the shadows between the pines. "Just a warning. Don't forget this land is older than any of us. It keeps secrets, and sometimes it doesn't like to give them back." Before Michael could reply, the man turned and shuffled away, leaving the words hanging like mist. The pastor came up behind Michael then, offering a cup of water. "Old Walter," he explained, "been around these parts longer than anyone. Don't mind his talk. He's full of stories about spirits and shadows in the woods." Michael took the cup, nodding slowly. "Spirits, ma." The pastor smiled faintly. "That's what happens when you live close to the mountains all your life. You start believing they're alive." Michael didn't answer. He looked back into the forest, at the sway of branches in the wind. The air seemed heavier there, darker somehow. He shook the thought off and turned back to the tree he had been working on. The axe fell again, crack after crack, until the tree groaned and began to tilt. With one final strike, it gave way, crashing to the earth with a thunderous boom that echoed through the valley. Birds scattered in a flurry of wings. Michael stood over it, chest heaving, hands roar, the sound still ringing in his ears. For a brief moment, he felt like he had won a battle against something larger than himself. But then he remembered the old man's words, and unease crept into his chest as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ground. Michael gathered the cut wood and carried it back toward the church. The villagers clapped him on the back, their voices warm with thanks. Yet, when he glanced once more at the forest behind him, it felt less like a place of peace and more like a place that was watching. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered if the old man had been right. The afternoon sun hung low, its golden light spilling across the forest floor. Michael adjusted his grip on the axe, sweat dripping into his eyes. The pine tree before him groaned under the weight of each strike. He had been working for hours, his muscles screaming, but he was determined to finish this one last tree before heading back to the church. The pastor had gone to town for supplies. Most of the townsfolk who'd stopped by earlier had already returned to their lives. It was just Michael now, alone with the woods. The forest carried a strange silence, broken only by the rhythmic crack of the axe and the whisper of wind weaving through the branches. Michael planted his feet firmly and swung. The blade sank deep, resin bursting like a wound. The trunk leaned, its weight shifting. He stepped back, preparing for the fall. That was when the wind rose. It came suddenly, a powerful gust barreling down the valley, catching the tree instead of dropping cleanly in the direction Michael had calculated. The trunk twisted, branches clawed against the air like desperate arms. The sound was deafening, a groan, a crack, and then a thunderous crash. Michael tried to leap out of the way, but the ground was uneven. A massive branch snapped free as the tree hit, striking him across the legs. He hit the ground hard, The air punched from his lungs. Pain erupted through his body. Sharp and blinding, he gasped, plowing at the earth, trying to pull himself free. The weight of the branch pinned his right leg. He shoved at it with all his strength, but it didn't budge. His breath came in ragged bursts. Panic began to sprint, cold and relentless. "Come on," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Come on, move." He pushed again, muscles straining, veins bulging. But the wood was too heavy. Every attempt sent waves of agony ripping through his leg. It felt broken, crushed beneath the branch's weight. The forest, once alive with sound, now seemed to listen. The wind settled into a quiet murmur. Birds had vanished. The silence pressed down, thick and suffocating. Michael collapsed back against the ground, chest heaving. The smell of pine was overwhelming, sticky resin seeping into the soil around him. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to think, to remember his training. Stay calm, assess the situation, find a way out. But no amount of training could change the truth. He was pinned, alone, and the sun was already sinking. He dug his fingers into the dirt, trying to drag his body sideways, inch by painful inch. The effort tore a raw cry from his throat. His leg refused to move, trapped beneath the crushing weight. Minutes blurred into hours. Sweat mixed with blood on his skin. His hands trembled as he reached again, tried again, failed again. By late afternoon, shadows stretched long and thin across the forest floor. The sky above darkened, colors shifting from gold to gray. The temperature dropped, and with it came the chill of dread. Michael's mind turned where it always did in moments of weak, her small face, those innocent questions about her mother. He had promised he would do better, that he wouldn't leave her alone in this world, and yet here he was, helpless, trapped, the threat of death closing in. Tears stung his eyes, though he fought them back. "Not like this," he whispered. "Not out here. Not now." He clawed again at the branch, his nails breaking, blood smearing the bark. Pain roared up his leg, sharp enough to make him bite down on his own arm to stifle a scream. But the branch didn't move. The forest grew darker. Every rustle in the undergrowth made his heart pound. The woods were alive with things that thrived in the night. Wolves, coyotes, things that wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of a wounded man. Michael's breaths grew shallow, his strength fading with the light. He head up at the canopy, the last sliver of sun bleeding through the pines. Hope, once so steady, was slipping away, and in the growing dark, the forest began to feel less like a place of work and more like a grave waiting to be filled. The light was gone. What little warmth the sun had left behind sank quickly into the earth, leaving Michael in a world of shadows. The trees towered above him, black silhouettes against a fading sky. The cold crept in, biting at his skin, sinking deep into his bones. He lay pinned beneath a heavy branch, his breaths uneven, his strength draining away with every hour. His leg throbbed, each pulse of pain a cruel reminder that he was trapped. His mind went to Sophie. He saw her face as clear as if she stood right there beside him, her wide eyes, her small hands clutching that stumped rabbit. She had already lost her mother. Now, because of his carelessness, she might lose her father too. The thought struck harder than the branch crushing his leg. He whispered into the dark, voice raw and broken. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I promised you better than this. I promised." A forest answered with silence, then with sound. The wind picked up, whistling through the pines, twisting the branches into eerie shapes that clawed at the night. Leaves rustled, skittering across the ground like small animals fleeing. The air carried a new sharpness, one that raised the hairs along his arms. Michael strained his ears. At first it was only the wind, then another sound. Soft, deliberate, footsteps, padded and cautious. His stomach turned cold. He lifted his head, eyes scanning the darkness. That was when he saw them. Glints of light, low to the ground, moving between the trees. Eyes, dozens of them, yellow, unblinking, watching him. The shapes began to form long bodies, lean muscles, fur blending into the dark wolves. Michael's heart pounded. He had heard their howls before, far away, a lonely sound rolling across the valley. But this was different. This was close. The pack crept closer, their movements silent except for the occasional snap of a twig. He could see their breath puffing in the cold air, hear the faint growls rumbling in their throats. Predators, and him. A wounded animal, pinned and helpless. He reached for the axe, but it had fallen just out of reach when the branch struck him. His fingers clawed at the dirt, stretching toward it. But it was no use. The handle was inches too far. His chest tightened. Panic threatened to overtake him, but he forced it down. If this is the end, he thought, I won't go down begging. Sophie deserves better than that. Clara deserves better. He searched the ground nearby and found a jagged rock. his hand closing around it. It was small, pathetic compared to the wolves circling him, but it was all he had. The largest wolf stepped forward, its eyes glowing in the thin light, its ears flicked back, lips curling to reveal sharp teeth. It was testing him, waiting for the right moment. Michael gritted his teeth, holding the rock like a weapon. His leg throbbed. His body screamed for rest. But he raised his arm, ready to strike. If they came for him, he would fight until his last breath. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the sound of growls that grew louder, closer. The wolves fanned out, their glowing eyes circling, waiting for weakness. Michael braced himself. His mind flashed with Sophie's face again, her laughter, her questions, her innocence. The thought that she would grow up without him, that she would be alone in this world, burned hotter than any fear of the wolves. "I'm not done yet," he whispered through clenched teeth. "Not tonight." But as the shadows moved and the eyes drew closer, even he knew the odds were against him. Pinned, bleeding, surrounded, Michael faced the forest's darkest truth. Tonight, the wilderness would decide if he lived or died. And in that moment, with the cold pressing in and the wolves preparing to strike, he steeled himself for the worst. The wolves crept closer, their yellow eyes glowing like lanterns in the night. Michael tightened his grip on the jagged rock, his body trembling from pain and exhaustion. He knew he couldn't fight them all. His breaths came short and ragged, fogging the cold air. The largest wolf stepped forward, shoulders low, teeth flashing white. A growl rumbled deep in its chest. The pack shifted with it, shadows closing in around him. Michael raised the rock, ready for the inevitable. "So, this is it," he thought. "I'm sorry, Sophie." Then the night split open with a fierce, commanding, a bark. The wolves froze, their ears twitching toward the noise. Out of the darkness, another figure emerged. It was a dog, large, lean, with the unmistakable frame of a German shepherd. Its ribs showed beneath its rough coat, its body scarred from battles long past. One ear was torn, hanging ragged, and across its muzzle ran a faded scar. It looked wild, weathered, as if the forest itself had claimed it. The dog stepped between Michael and the wolves, head low, hackles raised. A deep snarl rolled out of its throat, followed by another bark louder, sharper. The wolves hesitated. Their leader growled, teeth bared, but the dog didn't flinch. It lunged forward, snapping its jaws with a crack that echoed through the trees. The standoff broke. The wolves scattered back into the shadows, tails low, their glowing eyes retreating into the forest's depths. Within seconds, the pack was gone, swallowed by the night. Silence returned, heavy and unreal. Michael lay there, chest heaving, staring at the dog in disbelief. His heart hammered as he tried to process what had just happened. The animal turned, its dark eyes locking with his. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, the dog padded toward him. Its steps were cautious, deliberate, as if measuring whether Michael was friend or foe. It sniffed the air, circled once, and then lowered itself to the ground beside him. Close, protective. Michael let out a shaky laugh, one that broke halfway into a sob. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered. "A dog out here." He reached out a trembling hand. The shepherd didn't back away, though it didn't lean in either. Its presence alone was enough a barrier between Michael and the darkness that had nearly swallowed him whole. "Guess I'm not alone after all," he murmured. The dog's ears twitched at his voice, its body settling against the earth. It kept its head lifted, eyes scanning the forest, as though daring the wolves to return. Every so often, a low growl slipped from its throat, a warning to anything watching from the shadows. Michael couldn't stop staring. There was something about the animal that struck him deep, something beyond luck or coincidence. It had appeared in the exact moment he was ready to give up, a stranger in the night, but not unwelcome. "You're not much to look at," Michael said softly, his voice weak but steady. "But right now, you might be the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The shepherd huffed, almost like it understood, and rested its body a little closer to his side. Michael leaned his head back against the dirt, eyes burning with exhaustion and gratitude. Pain still throbbed through his leg, the cold still gnawed at his skin, but the crushing weight of fear had eased. He was no longer alone. The forest seemed quieter now, calmer. The wind whispered through the pines, but the menace was gone. Even the stars above appeared brighter, their light filtering through the branches to touch the ground where man and dog lay together. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, whispering into the night, "Thank you." And though he didn't know if the dog understood, it stayed beside him, silent and steadfast, a guardian he had never asked for, but desperately needed. The forest was silent again, but Michael knew the silence would not last. Pain pulsed through his leg, where a heavy branch pinned him. every throb reminding him how fragile his situation was. He glanced at the dog, the scarred German shepherd still lying close, eyes sharp, as though guarding him against the unseen. Then the animal stood, sniffed around the fallen tree, and lowered its body to the ground. With surprising force, it began to dig. Its paws clawed at the earth, sending dirt flying as it worked its way beneath the heavy trunk. Michael blinked in disbelief. "You're trying to help me." His voice cracked, hoarse from thirst and fear. The dog didn't stop. Each paw strike was quick, relentless, sending vibrations through the ground. It shifted positions, testing the soil, then returned to dig with renewed determination. Michael felt a flicker of hope. He pressed his palms against the bark, trying to lift the branch, but his strength was gone. His body trembled, drained by hours of struggle. The dog was his only chance now. As the animal dug, Michael's mind wandered. Memories surfaced, images from his time in the Marines, training under the burning sun, mud clinging to his uniform, instructors shouting until his voice was hoarse, nights without sleep, days when his body screamed to quit. But his mind had learned one lesson above all: endure. Pain is just the body's way of reminding you that you're alive, he whispered, repeating words from an old sergeant. Endure. Grayson, just endure. The dog paused, ears flicking at his voice, then returned to digging. Michael clenched his teeth as another wave of pain surged through his leg. It was sharp, blinding, making the edges of his vision blur. He wanted to scream, but he forced himself to breathe, slow and steady. The dog needed him calm. Panic would only waste the little energy he had left. The minutes stretched, each one heavier than the last. Dirt piled around them, dark against the fading light. The forest had grown colder, the kind of cold that sank into the bones. Michael shivered, pulling his jacket tighter with shaking hands. The sun had slipped away now, leaving only the dim glow of twilight. Shadows thickened among the trees, and with the darkness came the sounds: branches cracking, distant howls carried on the wind. The wolves hadn't gone far. Michael's heart hammered, but the shepherd didn't falter. It growled low in its throat and kept working, as if it knew time was running out. "Good boy," Michael whispered, his voice trembling. "Don't stop now." Hours seemed to pass. The sky turned black, sprinkled with faint stars. The forest was alive with noises: owls calling, insects humming, the occasional rustle of something moving in the undergrowth. Every sound pressed against Michael's nerves, but the steady rhythm of paws digging was an anchor, pulling him back from despair. His body was failing, though. He could feel it. His lips were cracked from thirst, his skin clammy with sweat despite the cold. Every breath was harder to take. He closed his eyes, drifting between moments of clarity and darkness. But each time he slipped, Sophie's face appeared, her small hands clutching his shirt, her voice asking, "Daddy, will you stay with me forever?" That memory jolted him awake again and again. He couldn't let go. Not now. Not while she was waiting for him. The dog barked suddenly, sharp and urgent, pulling him back. It had cleared enough dirt that part of the branch shifted slightly, no longer pressing as firmly against his leg. Michael's heart leaped. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was progress. Summoning what strength he had left, Michael pressed his hands to the trunk and tried to push. The wood groaned but didn't move. His arms shook violently. He fell back, gasping for air. The dog snarled at the tree as if angry at its resistance, then returned to the dirt. Michael laughed weakly, a hollow sound. "You're as stubborn as me," he said, voice breaking. The night deepened. The pain grew sharper, heavier, relentless, but side by side, man and dog fought against the crushing weight of the forest. One with claw and grits, the other with memory and will. Every second was survival. Every breath was defiance. And though the darkness pressed in, though the wolves circled unseen, though the cold tried to steal the last of his strength, Michael knew one thing: he wasn't giving up. Not tonight. Not with Sophie's face burned into his heart. Not with the guardian at his side. The forest was deep in silence, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Michael lay trapped beneath the heavy branch, his body trembling. The strength that had carried him through the long hours of struggle was slipping away. His breaths came shallow, each one a reminder that he was losing ground. Blood loss and exhaustion dulled his senses. His head swam, and the sharp edges of pain blurred into something distant, almost unreal. He tried to lift his hand, but it felt like stone. His eyelids grew heavier with every blink. Beside him, the German shepherd remained. The scarred dog pressed close, its body warm against Michael's side. He could feel its steady breathing, the rise and fall like a quiet drumbeat against the silence. In the freezing mountain air, that warmth meant everything. Without it, he might have already drifted past the point of no return. The dog was more than warmth, though its ears twitched at every sound in the night. The faint crack of a branch, the distant call of an owl, the low shuffle of something moving through the undergrowth. Each time, the shepherd raised its head, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, a low growl rumbling in its chest until the danger passed. Then it lowered itself again, pressing close to Michael, guarding him like a sentry. Michael wanted to thank it, but the words stuck in his throat. His voice was too weak now, his body too heavy. All he could manage was a faint whisper, one the wind carried away before even the dog could hear. The night dragged on, stretching into an eternity. Cold gnawed at his bones. His thoughts grew tangled, drifting between memories and dreams. He saw flashes of Sophia's laugh, her wide, innocent eyes. He heard Clara's voice, soft and gentle, telling him not to be late for dinner. He smelled the faint trace of coffee on a summer morning. The line between reality and dream blurred. And then, in that haze, he saw her, Clara. She was standing at a distance, framed by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through trees. Her hair moved with the breeze, her face calm, her smile soft to jest at he remembered. For a moment, the weight of pain fell away. For a moment, it felt like he had stepped out of the forest and back into their home. Clara, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if his lips had moved at all. She didn't answer. She only smiled. That same smile that had once lit his darkest days. That smile that had carried him through grief when nothing else could. Behind her, another figure appeared, an older man, his posture firm, his expression kind but steady. Michael knew that face as father's, a man who had left the world too soon, but whose lessons had never faded. The old man spoke, his voice deep and familiar, carrying across the dream like a steady current. "You are not alone. Son, you are never alone." Michael felt his chest tighten, a wave of emotion breaking through the numbness. His father's voice continued. "There are always guardians. Some you can see, some you cannot. They watch, they guide, they protect, even now, even here." Michael turned his head slightly in the dream, toward the shepherd cold beside him. The message was clear. The dog wasn't chance. It wasn't coincidence. It was a guardian, sent in the moment he needed it most. Clara's smile grew brighter, and she raised her hand, as if to reach for him. He wanted to go to her, to step forward and feel her touch again, but his father's voice held him steady. "Endure, Michael. Hold on. Not for us, for the life that still needs you." Sophie's face flashed before him again, her small voice echoing. "Daddy, will you stay with me forever?" His chest ached, but in that ache came strength. Even in the dream, he forced his body to breathe deeper, to cling to the little air he still had left. The forest remained cold and merciless. The pain in his leg hadn't vanished. The wolves were still out there, their eyes hidden among the shadows. But Michael no longer felt the crushing weight of despair, because he knew now he wasn't fighting alone. He had Clara's memory. He had his father's words. He had Sophie's future waiting for him. And here, in the dark, he had the scarred shepherd pressed against him, a living shield against the night. The hours crawled on. Michael slipped in and out of consciousness, sometimes lost in dreams, sometimes aware of the cold earth beneath him. Each time he woke, the dog was still there, loyal and unyielding. Its body was tense, ready, guarding him as though nothing else mattered. When the darkest part of the night passed, a faint glow touched the horizon. Michael saw it through half-closed eyes. Dawn was near, and as the first light of morning began to brush the trees, Michael whispered with the last of his strength. His words carried only to the dog at his side. "Thank you, guardian." The shepherd's ears twitched. It pressed closer, resting its head against his chest. And together, man and dog faced the long, cold night until the light finally came. The night had stretched like an eternity, but finally, the darkness began to break. A faint glow touched the edges of the sky, painting the treetops in pale silver. The cold was still bitter, biting into Michael's skin, but something in the air shifted. It was no longer the endless grip of night, it was the quiet promise of dawn. Michael opened his eyes slowly, fighting against the heavy pull of exhaustion. Every muscle in his body screamed with pain, but his heart stirred at the sight of light filtering through the branches. Dawn. He had survived the night. Beside him, the German shepherd stirred as well, its ears pricked forward. Alert, the dog stood, tail stiff, scanning the woods as though it too knew the world was about to change. Michael licked his dry lips, whispering hoarsely, "We made it at least this far." The forest began to awaken. Birds called faintly from the canopy. The wind moved softer, carrying with it the scent of pine and wet earth. For the first time in what felt like forever, Michael felt something other than fear. It wasn't safety, not yet, but it was the flicker of hope that it came. A sound carried faintly through the trees. Michael Grayson. His heart stopped. He held his breath, straining to hear. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't imagination. It was a human voice, distant but real. The shepherd heard it too. Its ears snapped to attention, and suddenly it barked loud, sharp, echoing through the forest. A sound not of warning, but of signal. Michael's throat tightened. Relief flooded him so quickly it nearly made him dizzy. Yes, over here. He tried to shout, but his voice was broken. Barely more than a rasp.
The dog barked again, louder this time, pushing its voice into the trees. Then again, and again. Each bark was urgent, commanding, impossible to ignore. Somewhere in the distance, voices responded. Did you hear that? Over there. Michael's eyes filled with tears. The search team, they were close. The shepherd moved away from his side, pacing in a tight circle before bolting a few steps into the woods. Then it stopped, looked back at him, and barked again as if urging him to hold on just a little longer. Michael laughed weakly, tears spilling over.
Go on, boy. Bring them here. Bring them. The dog bounded forward, its body cutting through the undergrowth, voice ringing out like a beacon. Michael lay back, listening as the box grew sharper, leading, guiding. Minutes passed agonizingly slow. Michael's strength faded with every heartbeat. His vision blurred, the edges of the world slipping away. But then, through the fog of pain, he heard it. Footsteps crashing through the brush. The sound of men calling. They're over here. He tried to lift his hand, to signal them, but it barely moved. Still, the sound grew closer. Branches snapped. Boots thudded against the earth. Then a figure broke through the trees. One of the church volunteers, eyes wide as he spotted Michael pinned beneath the fallen trunk. My God, the man gasped. He's alive. We found him. More voices joined in, relief and urgency filling the air. Michael felt hands on his shoulders. I heard the rustle of fabric as someone dropped beside him. Stay with us, Michael. You're going to be okay. Michael's lips parted, but words failed him. All he could do was glance toward the edge of the trees where the shepherd stood. The dog hadn't followed the rescuers all the way. It lingered at a distance, half hidden in the shadows, watching its chest rose and fell, its scarred ear flicking back. For a moment, their eyes met. Michael felt something pass between them, unspoken, undeniable gratitude, understanding, a bond forged in the darkest hours. The shepherd barked once more, then turned and slipped silently back into the forest. Michael tried to call out, to beg it to stay, but his voice cracked. The rescuers were already working, lifting the branch, stabilizing his leg, wrapping him in blankets. His vision blurred again, not from weakness this time, but from the weight of emotion. He was safe, he was alive, but the one who had carried him through the night, the guardian who had stood between him and death, was gone, swallowed by the woods like a shadow returning to where it belonged. As the team prepared to carry him back, Michael let his eyes close. He whispered a single word, meant only for the one who would never hear it. Thank you. And for the first time since Clara's death, he felt the true warmth of hope. Hands were on him now, from steady, real. After hours of cold, silence, and pain, Michael finally felt the presence of other people. The search team had arrived, their flashlights cutting through the dim forest light, their voices quick but calm, careful. His leg is pinned bad, one of them said. Michael tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. His throat was dry, his body shaking from exhaustion. All he could manage was a weak nod as they assessed the situation. The men worked with urgency. Two of them braced the trunk, while another slid a lever beneath a branch. On three, someone called. They heaved, straining together, the wood groaning as it shifted. For Michael, it felt like hours, but then suddenly the crushing weight lifted from his leg. Air rushed from his lungs in relief. He could feel blood returning, painful but alive. Got him free. A rescuer shouted. Another knelt beside him, checking his pulse. He's weak, but he's alive. We need to get him out of here now. They wrapped his leg quickly, stabilizing it with a splint. A blanket went over his shoulders. Michael barely had the strength to hold it, but the warmth was a small mercy after the long night. Through the blur of motion, he became aware of something else. I was watching from a distance. He turned his head slightly, searching through the trees, and there it was. The German shepherd stood just beyond the light, half hidden in the shadows. Its body was still, ears pricked, gaze fixed on Michael. Michael's trick tightened. He wanted to call out, to reach a hand toward the dog, but the rescuers were already lifting him onto a stretcher. His body was too weak, his voice too broken. All he could do was meet the dog's eyes one last time. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The rescuers' voices faded, the pain dulled. It was just him and the Scottish shepherd, locked in silent understanding. Then, As the men began to carry Michael away, the dog turned. Without a sound, it slipped back into the forest, one step, then another, until its figure was gone. It vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, like a shadow returning to the wild. Michael's heart ached. He wanted to thank it. He wanted to tell them all that he wouldn't be alive without that animal. But the words stayed inside, caught between exhaustion and disbelief. "Stay with us," Michael, one of the rescuers, urged as they carried him. "We've got you." His eyelids were heavy. His body begged to shut down, to rest. But he fought to stay awake, if only to hold on to that last image of the shepherd. The team moved quickly, guiding the stretcher through the dense trees, their flashlights bouncing against the bark. Michael drifted in and out, catching fragments of conversation. "He's lucky. If we'd been a few hours later, must have been here all night." "Unbelievable," he held on. "Did you hear that barking earlier? That's how we found him." Michael tried to speak. He wanted to say it wasn't just barking. It was the dog, the guardian. But his voice broke before any words could come out. By the time they reached the clearing where a truck waited, his strength was gone. The men lifted him inside, wrapping him in thicker blankets. The engine started, a low rumble cutting through the still forest. Michael's eyes closed, but behind them he still saw the shepherd's silhouette, watching, protecting, and then disappearing into the trees. He knew he might never see it again, but deep inside, he understood something. Not all guardians were meant to stay. Some came only when you needed them most, and then returned to where they belonged. As the truck bounced along the dirt road, carrying him back toward safety, Michael let go. His body gave in to exhaustion, his mind sinking into darkness. But even in that darkness, the memory of the scarred German shepherd stayed bright, his silent protector in the night. Recovery was slow. Michael spent weeks confined to his bed, his leg bandaged and propped up, every movement a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. But he was alive, and each morning, when he opened his eyes, Sophie was there. She would climb onto the chair beside him, her small hands clutching a book or her favorite stuffed bear. Sometimes she just sat quietly, her big eyes watching him with a mix of worry and relief far too deep for a child her age. "Daddy, are you better now?" she asked one morning, her voice soft. Michael smiled, though the movement still pulled at the pain in his chest. "I'm getting there, sweetheart, thanks to someone very special." Her head tilted. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. It was time, she knew. Out there, in the woods, when I was hurt and couldn't move, I wasn't alone. A dogged German shepherd found me. He stayed with me all night. He kept me safe. Without him, I wouldn't be here. Sophie's eyes widened. "A dog saved you?" "Yes," Michael said, his voice queered, thick with emotion. "He was strong, scarred, and brave. He scared away the wolves. He kept me warm when it was cold. He never left my side until the rescuers came. I called him the invisible guardian." Sophie whispered the word, almost reverently. "Guardian." Michael nodded. "That's right. He was my guardian. I'll never forget him." From that day, the story became part of their routine. Each night before bed, Sophie would climb under the covers and ask, "Tell me about Guardian again." And Michael would tell her about the way the dog barked into the night, the way it pressed against him in the cold, the way it vanished back into the forest when the rescue team arrived. His voice carried both gratitude and loss, because though Guardian had saved him, he had also disappeared like a shadow, leaving only memory behind. Weeks later, when Michael was strong enough to walk with a cane, he took Sophie into town. The church volunteers who had searched for him stopped to shake his hand, glad to see him alive. Life was slowly returning to normal, but one Saturday, Sophie tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we go see the animals at the shelter? Maybe Guardian's there." Michael almost laughed, but something in her hopeful face stopped him. He nodded. "All right, let's go." The shelter was small, run by a kind woman who recognized Michael from the rescue. She led them through rows of kennels, each filled with dogs of different shapes and sizes. Some barked eagerly, others lay quietly, watching with cautious eyes. And then Michael saw it. At the far end, curled in the corner of a pen, was a German shepherd pup. Its fur was soft but unmistakable, the same dark coat, the same intelligent eyes. It wasn't scarred like the dog that had saved him. It was young, new to the world, but the resemblance was undeniable. Michael froze. Sophie gasped, pressing her face to the bars. "Daddy, it looks just like Guardian." The pup lifted its head, ears flicking forward. Slowly, it stood and padded closer, its nose pressing against the bars. Its tail wagged hesitantly, as if sensing something familiar in the strangers before it. Michael knelt, ignoring the pool in his injured leg. His hand reached out, fingers brushing the pup's fur. Warm, alive, full of possibility. For a moment, Emotion surged through him: grief for the scarred shepherd who had vanished, gratitude for this new life before him, and a sense of fate he couldn't explain. The shelter worker smiled. He came in just a few days ago. No one's claimed him yet. Sweet little guy. Though smart, too. Michael looked at Sophie. Her eyes were shining. Daddy, can we take him home, please? We can keep Guardian with us forever now. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. Yes, he whispered. Yes, we can. Paperwork was signed. A collar was placed around the pup's neck. When they stepped outside into the afternoon sun, Sophie held the leash proudly, her laughter ringing through the air. Michael walked beside them, cane tapping against the pavement, watching the pup trot happily at Sophie's side. For the first time in a long time, the weight on his heart felt lighter. He glanced up at the sky, the memory of Clara's smile still vivid in his mind. He thought of his father's voice in that dream. There are always guardians. Michael believed it now. He looked down at the puppy, his new companion, and spoke softly. Welcome home, Guardian. The dog barked once, as if in reply. And for the first time since the accident, Michael felt not only alive but whole. Recovery was slow. Michael spent weeks confined to his bed, his leg bandaged and propped up, every movement a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. But he was alive, and each morning, when he opened his eyes, Sophie was there. She would climb onto the chair beside him, her small hands clutching a book or her favorite stuffed bear. Sometimes she just sat quietly, her big eyes watching, and with a mix of worry and relief far too deep for a child her age. Daddy, are you better now? She asked one morning. Her voice soft. Michael smiled, though the movement still pulled at the pain in his chest. I'm getting there, sweetheart, thanks to someone very special. Her head tilted. Who? He hesitated, then took a deep breath. It was time she knew. Out there, in the woods when I was hurt and couldn't move, I wasn't alone. A Dorga German shepherd found me. He stayed with me all night. He kept me safe. Without him, I wouldn't be here. Sophie's eyes widened. A dog saved you? Yes, Michael said. His voice caught, thick with emotion. He was strong, scarred, and brave. He scared away the wolves. He kept me warm when it was cold. He never left my side until the rescuers came. I call him the invisible guardian. Sophie whispered the word, almost reverently, guardian. Michael nodded. That's right. He was my guardian. I'll never forget him. From that day, the story became part of their routine. Each night before bed, Sophie would climb under the covers and ask, "Tell me about Guardian again." And Michael would tell her about the way the dog barked into the night, the way it pressed against him in the cold. Dwayne had vanished back into the forest when the rescue team arrived. His voice carried both gratitude and loss, because, though Guardian had saved him, he had also disappeared like a shadow, leaving only memory behind. Weeks later, when Michael was strong enough to walk with a cane, he took Sophie into town. The church volunteers who had searched for him stopped to shake his hand, glad to see him alive. Life was slowly returning to normal, but one Saturday, Sophie tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, can we go see the animals at the shelter? Maybe Guardian's there. Michael almost laughed, but something in her hopeful face stopped him. He nodded. All right, let's go. The shelter was small, run by a kind woman who recognized Michael from the rescue. She led them through rows of kennels, each filled with dogs of different shapes and sizes. Some barked eagerly, others lay quietly, watching with cautious eyes. And then Michael saw it. At the far end, curled in the corner of a pen, was a German shepherd pup. Its fur was soft but unmistakable, the same dark coat, the same intelligent eyes. It wasn't scarred like the dog that had saved him. It was young, new to the world, but the resemblance was undeniable. Michael froze. Sophie gasped, pressing her face to the bars. Daddy, it looks just like Guardian. The pup lifted its head, ears flicking forward. Slowly, it stood and patted closer, its nose pressing against the bars. Its tail wagged hesitantly, as if sensing something familiar in the strangers before it. Michael knelt, ignoring the pull in his injured leg. His hand reached out, fingers brushing the pup's fur, warm, alive, full of possibility. For a moment, emotion surged through him: grief for the scarred shepherd who had vanished, gratitude for this new life before him, and a sense of fate he couldn't explain. The shelter worker smiled. He came in just a few days ago. No one's claimed him yet. Sweet little guy, though. Smart, too. Michael looked at Sophie. Her eyes were shining. Daddy, can we take him home, please? We can keep Guardian with us forever now. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. Yes, he whispered. Yes, we can. Paperwork was signed. A collar was placed around the pup's neck. When they stepped outside into the afternoon sun, Sophie held the leash proudly, her laughter ringing through the air. Michael walked beside them, cane tapping against the pavement, watching the pup trot happily at Sophie's side. For the first time in a long time, the weight on his heart felt lighter. He glanced up at the sky, the memory of Clara's smile still vivid in his mind. He thought of his father's voice in that dream. There are always guardians. Michael believed it now. He looked down at the puppy, his new companion, and spoke softly. "Welcome home, guardian." The dog barked once, as if in reply, and for the first time since the accident, Michael felt not only alive but whole.